Buffy being renewed. Well, not being renewed, being rebooted by Joss Whedon. He's still involved. Um, and this time, the show will have a black female lead. Now, I don't have an issue with that, but I think that this is potentially I think it's very risky and very problematic for several reasons. First of all, Buffy is a cult classic and one of the most beloved shows in American television. It has a pretty strong, pretty vocalized fan base who has been stating for years that they would never want a reboot or remake, and they would hate it no matter what it turned out to be. And that's pretty much all I'm seeing with the response to this new remake.
The thing for me is that I have no real strong feelings about the decision to do a reboot, but I can't help but think of this one tweet I saw from Nash, who does the show Radio Dead Air, is why not just have it be the same universe with a new Slayer? Like, if what you're worried about is brand recognition, you could have, like, new character name, the Vampire Slayer, and people will recognize that it's the same oeuvre. It just, I'm not sure, unless it's just, Granted, I haven't watched all of Buffy, I'm still on my watch through of Buffy and Angel, but knowing things about that show already and, like, the topics that Whedon decided to explore there, maybe he feels like he has to set it in a different world so that it's not, like, treading old ground and he can talk about different things. But I don't know, like, I don't see why, like, what's to be lost from just doing a show that's set years later or whenever and being like, okay, same world, but we don't have to reference anything because, you know, new Slayers pop up. Unless you don't want to, maybe you don't want to rain on people's parades by saying Buffy died young or something, but I don't know. I feel like Reboot was not necessary. It could even be a prequel with, like, a Slayer set in, like, the 80s. I know that's weird, but I don't think it's any weirder than just doing a full-on reboot. Like, I'm not sure why that...
I'm not saying it's weird, just a prequel immediately makes me cringe. If you want to set it after in the same continuity, fine. I don't want to say that you can never touch Buffy. It's like this untouchable thing and it's perfect and no one should ever try to make an attempt at redoing it again. Because it was a decade ago and the world has changed and there's plenty of new topics and stuff you can explore with a Buffy set in today's era. So I don't see an issue with rebooting it at all. I am a rabid fan of the show, but I'm not so much a fan as to say, oh, don't touch it, you can never redo it, or anything like that.
I just haven't used rebooting things that don't necessarily have to be rebooted to be capitalized on.
Well, I mean, people will say all the time, oh, you don't need to reboot Buffy. Well, okay, I have two arguments on that. Number one, you don't need to reboot anything. Number two, like, it's been a full decade since that show came out. And, like, again, we live in an era where no one really has time for anything, yet alone, I imagine, introduce their kids to a show that's over 10 years old. So, I mean, if you like the old show better and you've already, you know, made up in your mind that this new show is going to be terrible, just go back and watch the old show. This new show doesn't ruin the old show. I've never agreed with that sentiment at all. You can still go back and watch it.
Yeah. I've never agreed with the idea of, like, because something's gotten rebooted, that the reboot has, like, replaced the original. Like, I'm one of the few people who liked the reboot of Ghostbusters, but that's not even if that movie was like widely liked, there's no reality in which that movie supplants the legacy of the original. Like that just doesn't happen. The only times that happens is when the reboot is like demonstrably and widely accepted as better than the original, when it's like a reboot or an adaptation or something, and that rarely happens. But it's like, you can just let a reboot be someone had another story that they wanted to tell with this property but didn't want to like step on the old toes. So, yeah, or they just wanted to make money without getting people mad at them for going back and like affecting the world that was left as it was. And the more I think about it, the more it's like, yeah, it would be, because they've kind of got themselves in a hole here, the way that I'm describing it, as doing like a potential sequel instead of a reboot. Because like I said, you don't want to get people peeved with the notion that like Buffy is a Slayer who died off in between the old show and now. But you also don't want to jump too far ahead, because if you've got a Vampire Slayer show set in like 2020 and beyond, then you're getting into a weird Buffy the Vampire Slayer mixed with speculative fiction, and you don't necessarily want to do that. That creates too many obstacles, maybe. So if the idea is we've decided we definitely want to set it in 2018 or around that time, then sure, a reboot is really the only decision that makes sense and will let you do that.
Especially because, well, maybe this isn't so tied in with that, but Joss Whedon, a lot of people don't know this because no one reads freaking comic books. He continued the show, like season 8 was the title of the comics. That's where the comics picked up where the show left off, and Joss Whedon kept telling stories with Buffy, I believe, pretty much all the way up to last year. I don't know if he's still writing the Buffy comics, but yeah, the show's been going on in comic book form for years.
And it's exactly what Sean did, and that show is also rebooted.
No one knows that because no one wants to pick up a comic book and read it, because those are just for kids. But yeah, we've been doing more Buffy stories since then, and you want to start fresh with something new, go for it. I mean, Joss Whedon created this show. This is his baby, and he's doing it again. So I have all the faith in the world that it'll be just as good, if not better. One thing that I think will get a really strong reaction from people, and I've already seen some of it online, is it being headlined by an African American woman. I would not have made that the headline. I wouldn't have even announced what race the person is going to be. Just, this is who we've decided to be our new Buffy. Like, the black woman's Buffy is now a label on the show, and that's sticky.
And did they do that, or did media outlets do that for them?
Well, yes and no, because in the announcement it did say that it was that the show was going to have a black actress play the lead. But yeah, I mean, black actress headlines Buffy reboot. That's the headline, and that wasn't said word for word in the announcement, but they did say we're gonna have a black woman headlining our show.
Yeah, that's a.
It's just like, why would you do that? Like, now you've made it kind of a race thing, and that's sticky.
Like, clearly, an underlying political statement is why you would do that casting, but by outright making it overt political statement in an announcement, you're just kind of asking for trouble.
Yeah. So like, I really wish they didn't do that. I really wish they just waited and just announced this is who we've decided is going to headline our show. Yeah, and like, you still would have had obnoxious people be like, oh, it's a black Buffy, I'm not going to watch it. But it wouldn't, I don't think the conversation would have been as political and toxic and race-based as it will now be, because they inadvertently made that the headline to this reboot is Black Buffy, and that's really unfortunate. So I think this actress.
You know what?
Go ahead.
A potential upside is getting all that discussion out of the way now, so that it doesn't suddenly erupt into people getting like really, like if imagine that they made sort of like a low-key announcement about whoever was canceled. Like, I'm trying to picture the world where people don't even realize that Buffy is going to be black until we get like promotional material, like photos and trailers and stuff. And that I could see being way worse. So maybe it's for the best that like this discourse gets, has its run before we actually see any of the show, so that by the time the show actually happens and is being advertised, people are like, okay, Black Buffy, I knew this was happening. And the people who are still mad about it are just gonna be mad about it.
Yeah, that's fair. I am a pretty big vampire fan in general, and we kind of don't have a good vampire show running right now. The originals just ended, but only the first 2 seasons were good. Season 4 was terrible, and what little I saw of season 5 was garbage. And Castlevania was great, but we only got like 6 episodes of that, and season 2 isn't coming out for another few months. So I like that we're going to have what will more than likely be some really good vampire content coming down the pipe soon.